9 to 10 p.m., Monday night on Liffey Sounds. The world you don't know. The world you don't know. 9 to 10 p.m., Monday night on Liffey Sounds.
Now, folks, you're very welcome to this evening's show. It is Monday, the 3rd of October, 2016. Now, just bear with me for a minute. I've got a new mic in here, so everything sounds extremely loud. Actually, sounds very, very well. I have a good show lined up for you tonight. Now, if you were listening in last week, you would have heard me mention a previous guest that I had on, Trevor Ivers. And he was a great guest. I really enjoyed having him on. So, I had him on, and we had just under an hour. And the subject that we were covering was the awakening process that people go through when they wake up, basically, when they come across all the kind of information that I discuss in this show, when they finally realise that the world that they live in, as the Matrix movie likes to say, is the world that's been pulled over your eyes to hide you from the truth. And when that happens to you, your whole head explodes and you go on this amazing journey. And as I said, we had less than an hour the last time I had Trevor on the show, and I've been chatting with Trevor on and off through Facebook and stuff like that, through private messages and whatnot. And I like Trevor. I like the way he presents information online and stuff like that. And I like the challenges that he comes upon. I get great pleasure reading the challenges that he faces every day trying to impart information, because, as I've always said in this show, when you become aware of this information, it's nearly impossible not to impart it to other people, because you feel, this world is not what we actually think it is, and I think it's my duty to inform people of what's really going on. And one of the big things that you come across when you do finally awaken from your slumber, from the cognitive dissonance that most people, unfortunately, on the whole planet suffer from. And it's not even that they suffer from, it's conditioning. It's all deliberate, folks. None of this is just accidental and stuff like that. This is deliberate. And what happens when you do go through your awakening process, that's one process you go through, and you tend to calm down from that then. But then the next process then is informing people, because you feel duty bound to do so. I mean, hence the reason I do my show. But what you come up against is cognitive dissonance. Now, most people would call it ignorance. It's not ignorance. It isn't, and I don't like using that term, because I consider that a derogatory term, because, when you're trying to wake someone up and you're trying to impart information, if it goes against their belief systems, they're going to challenge it. And that's the problem that the truth community faces today. I mean, it's been that way since time immemorial. It's as simple as that. This is not something new. I mean, you go back to the caveman. If cavemen were used to going into a big meadow every day and, just happily pick fruit or something like that, and there was no danger, but someone else along, and that was the way it always was, and then someone else came along and says, listen, if you stay here past, this particular time, these wild animals will come into this field and they'll eat you up. But if they've never seen them, well then cognitive dissonance will set in and say, no, what wild animals are you talking about? Something wrong with you, you're crazy. And it's the same with the truth movement. When you're trying to impart information to people, that's what you're up against. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Skype. Trevor, I know, is waiting in the wings. Now, as I said last week in the show, I'm going to have Trevor on from time to time. And we'll sort of bounce off each other, what he's looking at, what I'm looking at, and try and make a show out of it, rather than just having me every week just rabbiting on with my usual spiel. It's good to have another voice. I mean, I've had Robbie in here in the past, I've had Darren on the show in the past, and I think it's always great to get somebody else's perspective on what's going on. So, without further ado, I'm going to play a song first, and while the song is playing, I will get Trevor on, and this is a great song. This is Creedence Clearwater Revival, Have You Ever Seen the Rain? John Fogerty singing. I love this song. So I'll play a couple of minutes of this song while I'm getting Trevor on via Skype. So I'll talk to you all very shortly, folks, and enjoy. Folks, I'm going to cut that song short, because I do have Trevor on, and I want to try and get as much in for the hour that we have. Well, not even an hour, it's about 50 minutes, I'd say, thereabouts. So as I said, I do have Trevor waiting in the wings, and he is there. He's live on the line. So I'm going to go straight to Trevor. Good evening, Trevor.
Good evening, Mick.
Now,
can you hear me?
Yeah, just let me knock this off. Why is it not knocking off? Yeah, it's knocking off now. Yeah, it's the program takes a minute. It sort of brings the song down slowly, but that's gone now. Now, you sent me a little message there saying I mispronounced your surname. Is it Ivers or Evers?
It's Evers, yeah. There's no
Evers.
big deal. Most people call me Ivers, but
Right.
it's actually Evers.
Well, do you know what? Blame the education system, Trevor, because they taught me that that's how it's spelled. Anyway, Trevor, listen, you're very welcome back onto the World You Don't Know show.
Thanks very much, Mick,
Now-
and it's a pleasure to be back on. I really enjoyed the first one.
Well, I think the feedback we got off the first one was, I won't say off the scale, but it was very, very positive feedback that we got. A lot of people really enjoyed the show, and a lot of people actually enjoyed hearing you on the show and your story. That was what was so good about the feedback.
Well, it was great. I just actually had my wife listen to it, the first show there this evening, and her feedback was, listen, it's a great show, but make sure you get your name right this show, will you?
Well, I will. It's Trevor
my
Evers,
fans
ladies
here
and gentlemen.
killed.
If I heard anybody else saying Ivers, that's it. You're not getting on the show anymore. Nobody is. So get his name right, folks. Trevor Evers. Now, I want to. I'll tell you what I'm going to start, because I've been explaining to the listeners over the last couple of weeks that I intend getting you on. I'm sure you've heard me mention your name on a couple of previous shows, and you're gonna not so much a co-host, but you're gonna come on every now and again, and we'll discuss the issues of the day and stuff like that. And I can get your perspective, you can get mine, and two heads are always better than one, as I say.
Yeah.
So I want to start off with a post that you commented on today, and as soon as I seen it this morning, it jumped out at me, and it's from a friend of yours on Facebook called James O'Sullivan.
Yeah.
Now, you were talking in the post that you'd posted about coming up against the dreaded cognitive dissonance when you're telling somebody a little bit of truth and it interferes with their version of reality, and they just look at you like there's something wrong. And
right.
we get that all the time.
That's right.
And James put it brilliant. He summed it up very, very nicely. He says, and I'm going to read out what the man said. He said, that's known in psychology terms as the elastic band effect. There is 0 point in trying to argue with someone with a very small and tight-knit belief system, as it's proven that they have an underdeveloped neural net, i.e. their brain is not worried to listen to what you're telling them. And when you develop an understanding of a truth, you physically create the neural synapses in your brain, so the truth is hardwired. And when you have no ability for self-analysis and critical thought, your belief systems are very narrow, and so then become much more entrenched. And then when you try to push an individual into a concept beyond their ability to comprehend, they experience anxiety and pull away. That's the cognitive dissonance that you speak of. That's the elastic band effect. They need to work their own truths out for themselves. Then they can build a newer form of logical consciousness. Now, he also went on to mention as well in a previous comment that he made about Carl Jung, the psychologist. But it wasn't just Carl Jung. I think there was another famous psychologist at the turn of the century. He was the uncle of Edward Bernays, Sigmund Freud. And he trained up his nephew, Edward Bernays. And in the 1930s, Edward Bernays, as far as I can remember, went to work for propaganda departments for the British government. He figured out what makes people tick, and they've been manipulating us ever since.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So do you want to give you a little perspective on that?
Yeah, well, I don't know whether I should get into that particular incident. I've had an eventful couple of weeks in terms of, I suppose, trying to wake people up, in inverted quotes. And as you know, as following my Facebook post, I tend to kind of relate my experiences when it comes to those events and incidents. But I kind of take them with a pinch of salt. But that particular post was in regard to a conversation I had with a lady yesterday. I don't know whether I should go into the specifics of it, but the basic point was that what I was coming up with was...
It was about someone who was getting into difficulty with the taxman or something, wasn't it?
Yeah, a friend of mine got into difficulty with her business, with a taxman. And she started kind of going off on a kind of a rant, you know. And I kind of said, look, hold on a minute here. Who are we to judge? You know, so there's an all tax theft anyway. Well, what do you mean by that? I says, well, you know, like what's your tax money being used for? It's been used to pay overinflated salaries and pensions to corrupt politicians.
Fund wars.
You know, and to fund wars and so on and so on. Oh, she said, well, I don't look at it like that, she said. Well, I suppose if you look at it like that, but I don't look at it like that. She said, but people voted for it. It's the law, the government says so, and therefore, you know, you must obey type of thing. And I said, well, I didn't vote for it. And, I kind of got into it a little bit then where, just because it's a law, as you know yourself, Mick, acts and statutes are not law.
They're not. They're statutes. And
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
if anybody wants to, there's a great book you can get online. You can get the PDF version, and I think you can get it through BillyMcGuire.com. And it's a book called A Study of the Irish Text, and it was from a one of a prominent Irish translator called Micheál Ó Carúil, and he translated the Constitution. Now, the original 1937 Constitution, which is not the original one, but the Blue Book Constitution, the one that's around today, was written in Irish. And Article 41.1.1, in relation to the family, to me is probably one of the most interesting ones in it. Because there's a couple of versions of it. Now, the government's version is that the state recognises that the family is the basic unit of enforced society according to law, and that it has inalienable, invincible rights that are more antecedent to positive law. Some, bull crap like that. But the real translation, the actual literal translation of the Irish text, states that the state recognises the family as the basic unit of enforced society according to nature, and that it has inalienable, invincible rights that are more ancient and higher than any human statute. So your rights as a family supersede every single so-called law in this land.
That's right.
And you can invoke
inalienable
that
rights. I
because
mean,
it's in the
like,
Constitution. But that's something they don't want you to... The interesting thing about this book is it was pulled from print very soon after being released. Because I think a few bigwigs within government figured, hang on a minute, look what it says there. He's telling the people what that really means. And if someone uses that against us, there's nothing we can do.
Yeah.
But that's still there on the books. It can never be removed from the books. They'd have to put it to the people. And they won't.
Totally agree with you. Totally agree. But in this particular case, when I was putting up all these facts, and literally, I was there yesterday as a hypnotherapist to kind of promote my business. And the last thing I wanted really was to get into one of these conversations. But when this lady kind of had a go at my friend, this particular circumstance, it's just the way the conversation evolved type of thing. But all of a sudden, the person switched off and got very defensive and, no, listen, I don't want to talk about this. And the atmosphere changed. Within 30 seconds, it was a really kind of a strange atmosphere. It was like, and then she turned around to me and I said, no problem. And she looked up at me and she went, it's a really nice day out today, isn't it? And it was really kind of surreal. Like, because within 30 seconds, we'd gone from talking about something, I suppose, meaningful to something like the weather, which is the standard norm, it's a nice day out or whatever. And I was like, a bit taken aback by that. And for the rest of the day, we were basically next door neighbours. Like she had a table beside my table, and it was a bit frosty then for the rest of the day.
And when you were talking to her about taxation and stuff, what was her attitude like that? What you were telling her was just nuts, or?
Yeah, I could sense that, I was easygoing. I was a smile on my face. I was like, but I could tell she was getting very frustrated. She was getting almost angry.
Yeah, but that's...
She didn't want to hear this. She did something, look, I don't want to hear it. It was like, well, leave me alone type of thing,
That's a clear-cut sign of cognitive dissonance. I mean, when I came across that in the early days of doing what you're doing right now, I was offended. I used to get offended by people because I was shocked. I wasn't expecting that kind of reaction. It was like going up to someone and telling them that, you're a mass murderer. That's looks right. People give you, it's crazy.
Right. That's right. But I meant to say to you in the first interview that I think my perception of the word now is very much like, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie They Live.
I have. It's one of my favourite films.
You ever seen that?
Roddy Piper,
all time. And it's like when your man puts the sunglasses on him and all of a sudden he sees everything with new eyes, with perspective, and his worldview changes. And that's the best analogy I can give to the way I see the world at the minute. And yesterday it was kind of a surprise, and that I didn't really want to go there with this particular lady. It was a couple of weeks ago though. I think it was Saturday a week ago. Myself and a mate of mine, Brian, we attended an all-day seminar in Carrick where Ben Gilroy was talking at it. You might have heard of Ben, you might know Ben.
I know Ben, yeah, I do know him well.
Yeah, so he was talking about basically your rights in court as a lay litigant, and it was a very knowledgeable day, loads of information, loads of open-minded people. There was a real buzz about the place. It was a real atmosphere. You could sense that, it would really lift your spirit, lift your whole state,
Yeah.
So, and that evening we had a night planned. We had myself and Brian and another friend, Sean, who's also very awake. So the three of us are on the same wavelength. We kind of see we have the same worldview and we talk about everything. So we had a night out in Inistioge. We were staying over in Brian's place. And we met quite early in the night. So we met about 7:30. We had a couple of pints. And for about 2 hours, the conversation was brilliant. It was about anything and everything, covering from vaccines to the information at the seminar earlier on that day to even more esoteric subjects. But once the night went on, and by the way, when I go out for a night now, and it's part of my thing where I have all these kind of truth T-shirts,
And you wear them.
yeah, and I kind of wear them for a laugh to see, would anyone say anything or would anyone pass any remarks on them? And that particular night, I had my Day Live T-shirt, the one with Obey in the front of it.
Yeah, yeah.
I have other ones. I've had one there a couple of Sundays ago. I wore 9/11 as an inside job. I wore around for a day. Got a couple of funny looks that day as well. But as the night wore on, we started to mingle with different people, in the different pubs in Innisdeeg. And of course, I was kind of on a buzz and a high from the day that I was in it and from the friends I was with. And of course, I forgot at times who I was talking to. And I became aware quite quickly that, geez, I better watch what I'm saying here. Because with some people kind of, even getting nearly aggressive, And we had this kind of an in-joke between ourselves that night, and kind of just for a laugh. It's kind of a silly thing where, we'd ask people, look, have you ever heard of the Illuminati? Or have you ever heard of the New World Order? Just out of the blue, just see what they'd say. And it was a laugh for a while, but, people, there was one or two that kind of got nearly aggressive because of it,
Yeah, I put a post up there today. I don't know if you read it. It followed the post that your friend James O'Sullivan put up. I was sort of trying to re-explain what he'd said, and it was something I learned many, many moons ago about comfort zones. That's how I see humanity. I see most of humanity in this particular comfort zone where, they've got their 9-to-5 job, they've got their mortgage, they've got their car, they've got their 2.3 kids, they've got the nice house, and they're happy to go along paying their taxes and doing whatever the government tells them. And that's the majority of the planet. They're all in that comfort zone. And the thing about comfort zones, Trevor, is, I'll give you an analogy that I heard that put it succinctly into such simple terms, and it was from a gentleman called Lou Tice. I'd done a course many, many years ago run by the Pacific Institute in Washington. Now, they were running the course over here in Dublin, and I was lucky enough to get a place on it. It was a 12-step course, and this is what woke me up. It was this course that woke me up, and I figured out how your mind actually works, and I started asking questions then. I was already asking questions at that stage. I didn't know why I was asking them, but this course taught me the reasons I was asking them and the reasons my life was the way it was. But it explained comfort zones. And Lou Tice, he explained his comfort zone about this child that he'd adopted from a very abusive situation. And the child had been getting abused for, say, 10 years, for the first 10 years of its life. And Lou Tice and his wife then adopted this child and took him into their home. And they were nothing but loving, kind parents to the child, and nurturing the child. But because he was taken from one comfort zone and put into a completely opposite one to what he was used to abuse, now he was getting shown love. In order for him to get back to the comfort zone, to where he was getting abused and he'd feel normal, he had to start doing things on Lou Tice to try and make Lou angry towards him. It eventually culminated in him burning down their house.
Jeez.
And him going to prison for it. And he I think he was given 12 years or something in prison. But Lou Tice never turned his back on him because he understood why he did it. He was trying to take him out of a comfort zone by pointing out some truths that, the boy was thinking that abuse and degradation was his truth in his life. And Lou Tice pointed out, no, the real truth is love and nurture. That's the real truth. But cognitive dissonance, i.e. the comfort zone thing, that's exactly how I see it. And I, rather than try and convince people that, listen, the world you're living in is what's been pulled over your eyes to hide you from the truth, quoting Morpheus from The Matrix, I don't do that now. I just plant little seeds and leave it at that, and leave it up to them, because I find you're banging your head against a brick wall trying to tell someone something that they just don't want to listen to.
Absolutely, and I agree with that. But sometimes...
It doesn't mean you should stop what you're doing, though. That's one thing I will say.
But it depends on my mood. Sometimes it's good, like you're planting seeds, but other times, it's very easy to lose patience with it. There was a quote that I seen there yesterday from Ricky Gervais. Did you see that one?
I did. I think I seen that one. Yeah, can you remind me of it? I was only reading it yesterday.
It says, ignorance might be bliss for the ignorant.
Yeah.
But for the rest of us,
it's a pain in the arse or something like that.
Ass,
yeah. And he's right. He really is right when you think about it. Listen, Trevor, I need to go to some ads. So do you mind if you can mute your mic? That'd be great. Otherwise, try and stay as quiet as you can just for a couple of minutes. And I'll be back to folk. I'll be back in 2 minutes with Trevor. I was talking to you very soon.
Broadcasting to Lucan, this is Liffey Sound, 96.4 FM.
Now, folks, you're very welcome back. Trevor, you're still with me?
Yep.
That's great, that's
Still
great.
here.
Thanks very much for staying so quiet. Unfortunately, Skype and your fader is on the exact same microphone, so unfortunately, you have to stay quiet. There's nothing I can do unless you can mute your microphone, of course.
No problem.
Now, just something else I just want to bring to the listeners' attention. And I think it was your friend James O'Sullivan put up a post about the Department of Defence in the United States, and this to me ties in with cognitive dissonance, that people didn't even notice this. This is a news story in the United States that the Department of Defence over there paid a PR firm $540 million to make fake terrorist videos, i.e. ISIS videos, folks. And I have been saying in this show like that, you know, ISIS, in my opinion, is a creation of the Western powers, the cabal, the Illuminati, call them what you want, those who are in control of the Western Hemisphere. All this stuff about ISIS and all is just to scare the crap out of humanity. And unfortunately, people are buying it, Trevor.
Yeah. Absolutely. But the media, you know, they're just so clever, extremely clever on how they operate. I mean, like, people have different opinions on to why a lot of people are asleep. And a lot of people think, is it the fluoride in the water? You know, I mean, that Harvard study there a couple of years ago, was it 2012, that showed that it reduces children's IQ.
And you just have to look at children nowadays. I mean, children have, you know, unabridged access to the internet, and they're no smarter than they were 20 years ago. I think they're going backwards. I don't mean that for all kids, but I mean, most kids now are just stuck into social media. If it's not on Facebook, they don't want to know.
That's
You
it.
know, and it's sad. It really is. They're not learning anything about life, nothing at all.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I think that is a big part of it. But also, I think, you know, even more so is the media, how controlled the media is. And there's so many people, the masses, I suppose, still plugged into that. I mean, even if you look at last night, that documentary, that BBC documentary on Jimmy Savile, was a
Wait.
very clever documentary.
No, I haven't seen it yet. Oh, go on,
Yeah.
explain further. What was so
Yeah,
clever
well,
about it?
obviously it was a BBC funded and made documentary, and the whole objective of the documentary, in my view, was to tie a little ribbon on it to say, you know, it was just Jimmy Savile. He was a known nut. He was mad. He was an awful guy. You know, there's no conspiracy. There's no paedophile network running within the BBC. It was just one lone nut mad guy, and everyone now go back to sleep. Everything's okay, kind of thing, you know.
So Louis Theroux, as far as you're concerned, and as part of the problem. Not that I was never a fan of Louis Theroux anyway. He doesn't do anything for me. But
Absolutely, but if you look at the, you know, within the BBC, you know, the BBC actually gave Savile the platform for so long.
yeah,
To actually,
and he was a saint. You couldn't say a bad thing about the man.
yeah, and look at what's come out in the meantime. Even, like, you know, he was procuring children to former Prime Minister Ted Heath back in the late 60s, early 70s, for him to rape and murder them.
Here's one thing though that shocked me. I don't know if you've ever heard of a guy called Bill Maloney.
Yeah, I've
he-
heard of him. Yeah,
Well, he's
yeah.
behind a company called Pine Mash Films, and he makes documentaries
That's right.
exposing this very subject, paedophilia, within the political establishment in the UK. Now, he put out he done a show one night on the Luke Collins radio show in England. She does a great show over there as well. I don't know if you're aware of it. You should look her up. But she had Bill on one night, and they were talking about the Houses of Parliament being a crime scene because there was people coming forward saying that they were raped and abused and left, right and centre within the Houses of Parliament, in you know, in hidden rooms or whatever. And then last year the British government announced I think it was an £18 billion refurbishment of the House of Commons. And what Bill was saying was, they're cleaning up a crime scene, this is what they're doing.
Yeah.
You know, if all these alleged crimes happened in that building, no one should be allowed as much as, you know, dust down a window. You know, the police should be in there combing the whole building if it is such a crime scene. But that's never going to happen. We know that's not going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And like that documentary, like last night on Jimmy Savile, you know, it didn't cover, say, Savile's friendship with, say, Prince Charles.
Yeah. And he was extremely close to Prince Charles. I mean, he's...
Yeah.
For what I would describe as a, you know, compared to the likes of Prince Charles, a lowly radio DJ. That's all he was. He was just a radio DJ. He was nothing special. I mean, I'm on the radio here.
Yeah,
I've
absolutely.
no intentions of hobnobbing with with royalty and stuff
Well,
like that, you
of
know.
course. I mean, like to get close to say the Queen and Prince Charles, like
You need to be-
MI5 are going to audit anyone.
And they're going to vet
Right.
you, so they will know about your background, all your hidden secrets.
Absolutely, you're not going to get in within 100 miles of him.
So what
you
does
know?
that tell you then if someone of... I mean, don't get me wrong, folks. I do want to point this out, because I am a stickler for the law. Jimmy Savile was never, ever charged with an offence, ever. All of this has come out after Jimmy Savile has died. So the man has never... And I'm not defending him, don't get me wrong, folks. I just find it a bit stinky that they're pushing him out as the... documentary you watched last night proves, as the only one who ever did this. You know, and they're pushing the attention away from the ones who are really doing it, i.e. the government and Westminster and the entire British establishment as a whole. You know,
It's a scapegoat. I mean, to make him a scapegoat, to keep a lid.
but it's easy enough
on
to
people.
accuse him of all of this horrible stuff. And I've no doubt he most probably did do all of this stuff. There's enough people who come forward to say he did. But to accuse him after he's died, you know, why not bring all this out while he was alive? Why? Because he had the goods on everybody. That's why they never brought it out.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, and that's the only logical conclusion I can come to.
But you look at the high ratio of paedophiles like within the BBC, especially working in the music business. Like you have Ralph Harris and Jonathan King. Remember him as well?
I remember him very well, yeah.
You know, so I think last night's documentary was very much like a little bit like the RTE documentaries a couple of years ago on Mary Boyle,
Right.
where they insinuated that it might have been a serial killer from the UK that came in and took her.
Mm.
Whereas all along, it's like the political establishment knew who.
And I think the reason they said that in that documentary, because I seen there at the time, and the first thing that popped into my head was there's two of Mountjoy's oldest prisoners are two serial killers from the UK. They've been up there for a long, long time. Since the 70s they were caught. I think it was that guard from the Evening Herald. Is it John Carroll? He does a column in the Evening Herald in Dublin. I think he was the guard that caught them. But because I remember reading it in his book. He had this book, I can't remember the name, but something Sheriff I think it was called. And he, as I said, he caught these two guys. They were two serial killers. They were over here in Ireland. They abducted a couple of people and murdered a couple of ladies. And then with that documentary, the first thing I thought of when they were saying, it was a lone nut serial killer from the UK, I think the reason they said that was because it was already in Irish consciousness that there are serial killers operating in this country from the UK because they'd been caught.
Yeah.
You know, so it wasn't too big of a stretch for anyone to think, oh yeah, that documentary's after telling the truth there, they must be right. Whereas there was one there released recently which has political connections to her disappearance.
Yeah.
That the likes of Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael don't want getting out.
It was showed a lot of evidence that the political establishment covered it up back in the day.
I've no doubt. I mean, look what happened with that priest. Remember that priest that was murdered in the Midlands? His death was covered up as well because there was political connections to it, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, and you'd wonder how many stories are going to come out after certain celebrities pass away.
So, but that's the
you
thing,
look
isn't
at
it?
recently the allegations against Sir Cliff Richard.
Yeah. I think they're just hanging these people out to try to divert attention. It's like with what was that politician now? I can't remember his name. He was questioned there a while ago, but it turned out he didn't do it. But I think what they do, the way the establishment works in the UK, and I'm sure they do it here, is they get someone who is completely innocent and hasn't actually done anything and level accusations against them. So when these accusations are then disproven and the guy is, this was all made up, it makes it look good for those who actually did do something then. Say, well, this is just a witch hunt, you know. Look what happened to that guy. You know, everybody knows he was innocent and look what was said about him.
Yeah.
And, it deflects attention away from those who actually do have questions to answer, you know. Like members of the
all
royal
these
family.
things, I mean, whether it be a documentary from last night on Savile and like the Mary Boyle documentaries, are to keep a lid on the truth that there's some conspiracy involved. When you see, it's that thing, conspiracy theory, like people, once they hear that term, of course, they kind of switch off,
Yeah,
don't
they
they?
do it. Sorry there, I just had a little bit of a tickly throat. Yes, people do. I mean, the term, as you just said there, conspiracy theory, that was coined by the CIA back in the 60s to stop people asking questions about the JFK assassination, call them theorists. I mean, if you look at it, Albert Einstein was a theorist. I mean, the theory of evolution from Darwin, he's a theorist. They're not facts. None of them are facts. Einstein's theory of relativity, what's his name, Isaac Newton's theory of gravity, they're only theories. They've never been proven, ever. And yet the majority of humanity accept what they say as fact, especially evolution. You know, most people out there think we evolved from monkeys. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
You know, I certainly don't believe we evolved from monkeys anyway.
Yeah. Well, all the mainstream is basically to, to divert you away from the truth. And look, Bin Laden done 9/11, Oswald killed Kennedy, and so on and so on. And, to ridicule then anyone that thinks any different. And that's, to me, something like that documentary about Sava last night is along those lines. But they're very clever the way the media operate, and they're very deceiving.
But as I mentioned earlier on, I mean, the father of propaganda, particularly in the UK, was Edward Bernays, the nephew of Sigmund Freud. I mean, he knew what made people tick, and he didn't infiltrate the media, but he guided the media. Look, if you want to hypnotise the public, this is how you do it.
Yeah.
And they've come up with all their movies to hypnotise people that this is the way the world really is, and like most of it is. It's just codswallop. Yeah. Now, I wanted to ask you a question in relation. You're a part-time hypnotist. You practice hypnotherapy, so you know the ins and outs of hypnotherapy. How do you think they achieved this mass hypnosis on humanity? How did they do it? I mean, have you been looking at this and have you figured anything out? Like, how do you think they did it?
Well, I've come to the conclusion that, especially in Ireland, we love scapegoats. And you see, it's Enda Kenny's fault, and he's this and he's that, and he is all those things. And before it was John Bruton, and so on. But the thing is that if they left in the morning, there's probably thousands of soulless drones to replace them. And it's not the scapegoat. It's to basically I try to look higher than that.
Yeah.
And see the bigger picture. And it's actually really the people, and I don't like using the word sheep, but it's the people that are the glue that hold all the corruption in place, because they give these politicians their power.
Yeah.
And if you remember, you probably know the analogy with the sheepdog and the sheep and the farmer.
Yeah.
The sheepdog and the farmer, they don't have to really do too much, because if one sheep goes out of line, the rest of the sheep gather them back in fairly likely.
And they do as well. You can look at this in nature, folks. If you don't believe what Trevor just said there, go onto YouTube and just type in sheep herding and just watch a farmer in action how they do it. And if you do see, as you said, Trevor, if you see a sheep deviating from the crowd, the other sheep will run around him and say, get back in there, you.
Yeah, exactly.
You're upsetting the apple cart there. He's not going to be happy with us.
Yeah. But with hypnosis that, when I done the course back in 2010, I became a hypnotist in 2010, so it's almost 7 years now. Like, I was awake by then, but that even woke me up even more, because everything now I seen with new eyes.
When you done hypnosis, Trevor, if I can interrupt, did you then realise how easy it actually is to manipulate people on a much wider basis?
Yeah, of course. Like, the power of suggestion is all around us, and hypnosis is all around us as well. If you look at the corporations, like even some corporation like McDonald's, it's not a fluke that they're using suggestions like Happy Meal, for example, or I'm loving it. Or even the fact to have a clown as part of the whole advertising. Ronald McDonald, kids love clowns.
I wouldn't let him babysit me kids, I can tell you that.
Yeah, it's scary. It reminds me of, that movie It from...
He does, he looks like that fella out of it. I wouldn't have him minding my children. There's absolutely no way.
But that's the thing, that it really is all around us. People don't realise it. They really don't realise the extent of it. And when you look on the TV, most people, they don't realise it because it's subliminal, it's subconscious, a lot of it.
Do you think that the media are pumping hidden information? I mean, like the movie They Live, there's hidden information in TV screens and in books and magazines.
Oh, yeah.
Do you think they're actually really doing that? They're embedding this information?
Absolutely, they're doing it. So they're doing it since back in the 60s. Like Stanley Kubrick was a big one for doing it. In the movies, A Space Odyssey, 2001, and The Shining, that's full of messages.
Well, they say The Shining is him telling you that he faked the moon landings. If you...
Yeah.
I looked at a researcher called Jay Widener. I don't know if you've ever heard of him.
Yeah, I've heard of him. There's a documentary there, Room 237.
That's right, Jay. He's responsible for that. Yeah, that's about the making of The Shining and what Kubrick was trying to tell you. It makes a lot of sense when you're watching. Some people will watch and say, that's just conspiracy theory. It's just a coincidence. But I don't believe in coincidence. I think Stanley Kubrick was hired to filming a version of the moon landings. Now, I'm not saying they didn't go to the moon. I wasn't around back in '69, so I don't know. I was born 2 years later. But, I mean, even lately now, NASA have admitted, this is the funny thing about NASA. Lately, I watched the documentary on, I think it was the History Channel, and there was a NASA scientist on it telling the guy who was talking to him that they still hadn't figured out a way to get through the Van Allen belt. And I'm sitting there saying, well, how did you get to the bloody moon then?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If that's the case, how? And here's another thing: if you look
That's
at
right.
if you look at the moon buggies that they were in, and look at the capsule that they allegedly landed on the moon, there's no room for the bloody thing. Where did they put it?
But it looks like a
I've
trash
always
can.
wondered
I think
that.
somebody put up a meme there a while ago that, does anyone really believe that this trash can landed on the moon? Because it really does look like a trash
It does
can.
look like a trash can. I mean, I wouldn't go to the. I mean, I wouldn't go down to the local centre in one of them things. You know what I mean? I wouldn't trust it.
But I was actually in.
I'd rather trust a lad. That's saying something.
Well, absolutely, but Stanley Kubrick, not only in The Shining and A Space Odyssey 2001, like even A Space Odyssey 2001, like that, even the year he picked 2001, and we all know
The year of 9/11.
very famous event that happened in 2001.
Yeah. I
was
must
trying
go
to
back and
tell
watch
people-
that movie and see is there any like hidden, because I'll pick up on
Yeah.
them now if I know I'm looking for them. You know what I mean? So I must go back and have a look at that. Listen, Trevor, I need to go to my last set of ads. So do you mind doing the same again for a couple of minutes?
Yeah,
That'd be
no problem,
brilliant.
mate.
Folks, I'll be back in 2 minutes with the great Trevor Ivers. Talk to you very shortly.
You're listening to Liffey Sound, www.liffeysoundfm.ie. Listen online, community radio at its best.
Now, folks, you're very welcome back. Trevor, you're still with me, aren't you?
I'm still with you, mate.
That's great. Thanks very much. Now, I'm going to finish up on something a little more light-hearted, I suppose, Trevor. We've had some pretty serious issues to cover here tonight, and we've covered some very serious stuff that most people probably are not aware of. So we're just going to, just for the last few minutes of the show, folks, we're just going to go a little bit far out. There was an article I read over the weekend, and it was on the mainstream media, folks. This wasn't just on social media. It was actually in the mainstream, of an apparent UFO crash in Belfast. Now, did you hear about this, Trevor?
I haven't heard of it, mate.
Have
no.
you not? No. Well, apparently, folks, a UFO crashed in Belfast 3 or 4 days ago. There was apparently a massive police operation. They blocked off some particular street up there or something like that. And this is what the media is reporting, that it was a UFO that crashed up in Belfast. So I was wondering, had you heard anything about it? I didn't really look into it too much. I just thought it was a bit of a strange place to crash land a UFO in the middle of Belfast.
No, I haven't heard of it, but there's a great book there that I recommend by Cardinale. I don't know if you've read that book
I
called
haven't, no.
Conspiracy of Silence.
I'm aware of the book, but I haven't actually read it.
And that's a great book. That details many, like dozens, literally dozens of UFO sightings in Ireland.
Now, I've seen one myself. I'm just going to give you a brief synopsis of what it was that I seen, or a brief synopsis, should I say. I was walking out of my house one night. I was getting into the car, and I seen what I thought was the Garda helicopter off in the distance, towards the Dublin Mountains, on the South County Dublin. And I was getting closer and closer to me, and then the light went off, and I thought, well, that's a bit strange. And next thing I seen, I can only describe, I don't know if it was a UFO or not, I don't know what it was. Well, it was a UFO, it was an unidentified flying object. What it was, I can't say. But this thing was about the size of a football stadium. But the weird thing about it was, I wasn't the only one who seen it. There was 5 of us in the car, and everyone that was in the car seen it. Because I stopped the car and we got out. Had a look up, and it went right over our heads, about 500 foot above our heads. And this thing looked to be the size of a football stadium. But the thing about it was, there wasn't a sound off, and not a whisper. But it was like a blacker than black. It was just very weird. It was like looking into a dark hole. And it went over our heads and it just disappeared. And I thought nothing more of it. I said to the lads, look, I don't know what that was, but you seen it, I seen it, blah, blah, blah. And then I mentioned to a friend of mine the next day, and here's the funny thing. He left his house at the same time we left ours, but he went in the opposite direction. And he'd seen it from a different vantage point, about a mile away. And says, oh, yeah, I seen that. He said, I don't know what it was, he said, but I don't want to talk about it. But this thing was about the size of a football stadium. So to think that there isn't anything in the atmosphere, whether it's, terrestrial man-made or whether it's from somewhere else, I don't know. But there are UFOs. And I think, Trevor, to be honest with you, people will laugh at you. It's not a subject I've covered on my show much because it does come up for a lot of ridicule, like the flat earth and the Mandela effect and other things. I like to, to brush at them. But UFOs is not something I've really covered on the show, and I think I should.
Yeah.
Because millions of people, as far as I'm concerned, around the world can't all be crazy saying they're saying these
Yeah.
things.
Well, if you see, if you read that book as well, Leslie Keane, UFOs, generals, pilots, and military officials go on the record, I think is the name of it.
Right.
Paraphrasing, something along those lines. Like, a lot of these sightings isn't just like people tend to think that it was, some kind of redneck out in the lake fishing kind of thing, making up stories.
Yeah.
But, it's actually well documented, like the UFO phenomenon in general. And even going deeper into that, if people want to get into the abduction side of it. Because part of the whole thing on waking up as well and becoming a hypnotist is that I found out pretty quickly that people are asleep, not only, like there's hypnotists asleep as well, there's hypnotherapists, and there's groups out there, there's one particular group called Mindsight, and they were pushing at one stage, which is very much accepted, I suppose, in the mainstream now, what's called false memory syndrome. Have you ever heard of that, Mick?
Well, is that confabulation?
Yeah, well, false memory syndrome is actually something that was invented by the CIA back in the early 90s, I think 1994. Right. There was something called the McMartin preschool trials. Have you ever heard of them?
I haven't, no.
Yeah. Well, what that was the longest trial in American history. And that was where, there was actually 321 counts of child abuse involving 48 kids, right? And they went through basically, satanic ritual abuse and so on and so on and so on. And the jurors stated afterwards, even though they couldn't come to a decision, they said they did believe that the children had been abused, but they didn't have the evidence to confirm beyond reasonable doubt. Now, the actual kids went into all sorts of crazy stories involving like underground tunnels and, even aliens or whatever you want to call them. And the upshot of that was that they were all labelled as having false memory syndrome. In other words, it was a false belief that the kids had.
Well, one thing I can attest to...
spread throughout all the kids, And that's actually something that the CIA came up with to put a lid on that at the time. And even, you might have heard a guy called Ted Gunderson. Have you heard of him?
I've heard of Ted Gunderson, yeah, former FBI agent.
Yeah, he's a former head of the FBI. You can go onto YouTube and actually see videos of him basically proving and showing that the kids were actually telling the truth.
Yeah.
And it was all real. And the false memory syndrome is not real. It's only something that's made up, basically. But the funny thing, and it's a sad thing really, about it, that it's now by the establishment, the hypnotic establishment as well, looked on as real, as the de facto thing. Where before it was repressed memories. So how that relates to kind of the UFO thing and the abduction scenario is that, people that are abducted now, they label all as, this false memory syndrome. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where before it was like repressed memories. And repressed memories, in my view, is the right one. But
well, they're real memories, you just happen to repress them. And that's your brain's way of protecting you.
Exactly. But you see now, it was a very sad story, really. I think it's maybe about a year ago, I came across on this Mindsight page where this individual came to see this hypnotist and basically had a story to tell that they were abducted and etc. over a period of years. And he had, I think, 7 or 8 sessions with this particular person. He couldn't find any dents in the story. The story, he stuck to the story. He couldn't find any fault with it. And at the end of it, he just said, well, he must have false memory syndrome because it wasn't in the consciousness of that particular hypnotist to look outside that zone and think,
to step outside the box.
Yeah, could this be real? And when I came on, I remember that particular occasion, and I was the one voice in the wilderness saying, hold on a minute. And I shared a couple of those Ted Gunderson YouTube links. And it's the same as, every other aspect of society. It wasn't long before I learned that, it was ridiculed, you're a conspiracy theorist and, you ran out of town nearly, But that's the thing with this stuff. It's crazy, really, Well,
I mean, the UFO stuff, I think these programs that you see on the Discovery Channel and the History Channel, these ancient alien programs, a lot of them have a lot of, valid points to make in them, but I think those programs are designed to not get the viewer to not believe in aliens, but to get the viewer to believe that every bit of our human history has something to do with aliens. You know, like the building of the pyramids, the Nazca lines. You know, none of them will come out and say, well, you know, mankind probably did build this. I mean, because there's people out there who have proven that you can move massive stones. I've seen the videos on YouTube of a guy moving massive stones on a couple of little rolls, you know, and he's able to move them. And if he can do that, well then, you know, what else is possible, you know? I'm not saying the pyramids weren't built by aliens. I'm not saying they were. I don't know. But there's no construction company on the planet today that can replicate them.
Absolutely. Back in 2010, I actually wrote a book called The UFOs, The Gods of Past and Present, and just to my own amusement, really. And at the time, I researched the UFO subject and the ancient alien subject as well, and it's something that I became very interested in. But yeah, I'm on the same view as you. I mean, I actually travelled at that time to a lot of places such as Egypt and Malta and Turkey. You know, you see all these huge stones.
The ancient sites.
Yeah,
Malta's full of them, I believe, isn't it? It's full of dolmens and stuff like that, yeah.
It's unreal. You know, some of them are, you know, like they're 80-ton blocks, and they're 20, 30 feet in the air.
And who moved them? I mean, that's the crazy thing. Trevor, listen, we have unfortunately come to the end of the show. It's 2 minutes to 10, so we do need to wrap things up before the transmitter shuts down, and I want to be able to get the podcast and get it all in the one package. So listen, I'm definitely going to get you back on again, Trevor. This has been a great hour. It really is. You're full of knowledge, and, you know, it's great to talk to someone who's on the same wavelength as myself.
Good stuff, Mick. And again, it was a pleasure talking to you for the hour. Again,
it's never long enough. It flies in, doesn't it? Yeah, well, listen, I'll have you back on in the next few weeks, Trevor. We'll hit it off again, and we'll see where it takes us.
Good stuff, Mick.
All right, listen, thanks very much, Trevor. Thank you very much. Folks, this has been The World You Don't Know with myself and with Trevor Ivers, a celebrity guest if you want. But it's great having Trevor on. So until next time, folks, I'll be back in the hot seat next week. This has been The World You Don't Know. And remember, folks, the world is full of great people, and if you can't find one, be one. Talk to you all very soon.
Nine to 10 p.m. Monday night on Liffey Sounds. The World You Don't Know. The World You Don't Know. 9 to 10 p.m. Monday night on Liffey Sounds.